Welcome to 5 things to manage instead of your time. I'm excited about every one of these monthly sessions that I'm doing. First of all, because I get to interact with so many of you from different areas where I have spoken or where I'll have the opportunity, hopefully, to speak at some point. One of the things that I find it's interesting is I see some people from hospitality and extension and some of the different type of corporate groups that I've done. I see some people from education, both secondary and post-secondary education. So it's good to have such a great mix here today. As you're participating today, reminder, always feel free to type anything into the chat. Candy got things started and said, hey, I read Juggling Elephants. Thank you, Candy. You said you need a workbook. How about a course? How about an online course on Juggling Elephants, Candy? You can go to jonesu.com, and I've actually got a course there where you could really take your the ideas from Juggling Elephants to the next level. So would love to for you to check that out at some point. But thank you for offering that. These are sessions where I share some new ideas. Now, they don't always have the polish that I would deliver in an on-site presentation or a virtual presentation to an outside group, because sometimes they're fairly new, that I'm still kind of playing around with them and want to see how they work and what's going on with them. And so you get to be my eyes and ears and give me feedback about, yeah, Jones, that really resonated with me, or, Jones, I don't quite get that. So I say all that to say to you, please feel free to type anything into the chat about the concepts or ideas that we go through today. As I said, these are monthly sessions that I offer, have been doing it ever since the pandemic started. And as part of that, I always like to remind people that some of the other things that I deliver and that I do. So this month, I am, of course, highlighting on-site presentations. I'm getting more and more calls into the office, or emails primarily, people wanting information about possibly utilizing me for an on-site conference, especially late summer, third, fourth quarter. We're seeing things opening up, and I hope that continues. If you're a part of a group or an event who has an on-site conference coming up, or even a virtual, but especially if it's on-site, would love for you to consider utilizing my services in some way for that event, whether it's a keynote or a keynote and breakout sessions. If you got some training on specific skill area you want, or even if you just need somebody to facilitate. I actually facilitated a hotel technology conference a few weeks ago where I spoke, but I also introduced all the other speakers and kept things moving throughout the day. Would love the opportunity to help you out with something like that. You see my email at the bottom. That is the major promotional that I have for you today. All right, if you've been a part of any of my monthly sessions, you also know that I give 3 quick ideas. Some of you get bored quickly, and you need some tips and ideas to make this worthwhile. So here you go. Number 1, first quick idea today is to use the SMART framework to manage your stress. We talk about the things that you're going to manage besides your time. Stress is not one of them, but this is a bonus. But using the SMART framework, and I read this in an article today, a neuroscience article, and it talked about how we're all stressed out at any point in our life, and there's 2 types of stress. There's positive stress and there's negative stress. And one of the things that we can do is that when we start thinking about our stresses, first of all, we go, okay, what's stressing me right now? For example, in my world, what's stressing me right now is, one of the things is, I'm working on a new book. And so finding the time to write in that new book is difficult. And if all of you excuse me just a moment, I'm going to mute that person so that it's not distracting. But I'm working on a new book, and that's a good stress. And so I put that into what's called the SMART framework. I say, okay, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. So I can figure out, okay, Jones, if it's stressing you out, it's probably because you haven't been specific about how much you want to write. You aren't measuring it. You aren't thinking about if it's attainable. But I put that into that framework, and it helps me to manage that stress more effectively. Now, the other side of things is that if you've got a stress that you can't drop into this framework, for example, I'm worried about being safe from COVID or something like that. You can't put that in the framework. That's a negative stress. And so what you can do with that one is you go, okay, how do I minimize? How do I work through that? How do I, deal with that stress. But it's very different than the SMART framework, which is, of course, how you manage positive stress. So that's one of your first ideas. Second idea that I have for you today is a quote that I put on LinkedIn this morning. I think it was this morning, might have been yesterday, but it says, when you're looking at your to-do list, every item looks the same. Each takes up a single line, but some tasks take 15 minutes while other projects take 15 hours. I love this quote by Kelly Nolan in her article in Fast Company, because it's so true. I work with a lot of clients who say, oh yeah, I make a list of all the things I need to do. And then I say, well, do they all take the same amount of time? Well, no, there's one that's, I got to respond to this email. Another one is I need to start working on this project. Another one is I need to have a conversation with. And the challenge with that is when you look at a to-do list like that, your brain starts going, well, you've got about 15 minutes right now. Which one of these tasks could you get done in 15 minutes? Well, then you got to go think, okay, which one of these could I get done in about 15 minutes? It's a horrible way to manage your task list. A better way is when you want to create a task list, it's okay if you create it with lots of different items, but then figure out how much it's going to take, maybe even write it next to it, and then figure out where does it fit in your calendar. If you can't get it small enough into just one item, then spend some time breaking it down and saying, okay, this part's going to take me about 30 minutes. Okay, where's 30 minutes in your day to be able to get stuff done? So again, a way to manage your task list, something other than your time, is thinking about how you're managing it. The third one is email. Love this quote from a book that I just finished reading, A World Without Email by Cal Newport. Am I monitoring minutia? Isn't that a great way to think about email? Am I monitoring minutia? That's not helpful. It's not getting the things done that are most important if you're constantly responding to email. I was coaching someone the other day, and they told me that they keep their email open because somebody may need them, and so almost every 5 to 10 minutes they're responding to an email. I says, when do you get your deep work done? They're like, well, it's hard. And I said, yeah, and I gave him this quote. I said, are you monitoring minutia? I said, are those requests that come in, are they normally life-changing, or do they need to be responded to in 5 minutes? They're like, well, no. And so what we find is that sometimes when we're caught up in email, we are monitoring minutia. So an idea for managing your email. All right, now on to the topic for today, what we're really focusing on. Quote by a quote by Charlie Gilkey. Love this quote. It says, money can be managed, people can be managed, schedules can be managed, time can only be accounted for. Time can only be accounted for. How often do you say when you're stressed out or you've got a lot going on, you say, I just need to manage my time better. I just need to manage my time better. People ask me what I do or some of the areas I cover. I normally now say I help people make better choices with their time, which is what I really do. But in the past, or if I need a quick explanation, I might say, well, one of the spaces I cover is time management. What's ironic is that you can't manage time, can you? That's the real problem, is that you cannot manage time. Now, can somebody tell me, you can type it into the chat, why is it impossible to manage your time? Why is it impossible to manage your time? Give me a thought in the chat. Why is it impossible to manage your time? Why is that an impossible phrase? Exactly. Thank you, Tiffany. Yeah, time's always flowing. It's always, it's always moving. We can't do anything about it. It may seem that time is moving quicker, in some tasks or activities than others, but time is a constant. We have no control over how fast it goes or doesn't go. Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. You can't control it. That's exactly right. We don't have any control over it. We think we do, and we kind of fool ourselves in saying that when we say time management. But really, there's a lot of other things that I think we can manage much more effectively to help us get the most important things done. And those are the 5 things that I want to talk to you about today. So let's get started with those. The first one is energy. And I bring this picture of this beautiful koala up simply because It makes me relax. Of course, if you're a koala, you don't have energy or you're in a different gear anyway, because of all the hours that you sleep. What is it? I think a koala sleeps about, is it 20 hours a day? I read that somewhere. So it's a tremendously long time they do, but managing your energy. We don't say that a lot because we'd much rather say manage our time, but more specifically, how do we manage our energy? How do we make sure that the time we're using well because we've got the energy to deliver in that moment. So I want to look at energy on a few different levels. First of all, let's just talk about in the general flow of the day. All right. I love the book by Daniel Pink called When, because he talks in there about how our energy levels flow throughout the day. And about 75% of us follow the pattern you see where it says peak, trough, and rebound. And peak means that you get up, fairly early in the morning, or, you feel good first thing in the morning. And then after lunch, you begin to trough, and then you rebound, later in the day. And in fact, Daniel Pink would say the time people like us, because I'm in that first category, would trough the worst is around 2:55 p.m. Eastern time. Well, I guess in the work time that you're in would actually be more correct. So that's about 75% of us. Then there's another 25% of us who work differently. We start the day in recovery mode. And I thought that was a great phrase. You start the day in recovery mode, just trying to get your wits about you. And then, you typically don't work quite as efficiently throughout the morning until maybe late morning. You start hitting a little bit of a stride. And then, in the early afternoon, maybe you're still not really hitting it. But then as the day goes on, you just start really getting in, you feel your mental and emotional energy really picking up. And when that happens, then you're, considered what would be called a night owl. But knowing your energy level, knowing when your energy is the best, because as we've said before, I've said in previous sessions, if we can better manage our day based on our energy, we say, okay, I've got a high mental task I need to work on right now. Then when in the day do I feel most mentally capable of handling it? Because if you don't have the mental energy to handle it, it's a push. And it's probably going to take you 2 to 3 times as long to do that task because you're trying to find the mental energy when you don't have it. So that's one way I think to look at our energy. A second way is to think of energy in terms of buckets, to think of energy in terms of buckets: physical, mental, and emotional. Physical, mental, and emotional. We focus so much on physical energy and having the physical energy, to whether we feel like, doing something. We don't often stop and go, have I expended a lot of mental energy today? Because if we have, then it's hard to be able to be mentally present, in the next whatever it is we've got going on in our day. Perfect example of that are many of you are in back to back to back to back to back Zoom meetings. Every one of those requires a tremendous amount of mental focus if you need to participate. And without breaks between them, or at least saying to yourself, how can I renew my mental energy in that break? Then you probably find yourself not being as attentive as you should. And then third is emotional energy. And we think about this one least of all, but if you're working through a situation that's going to require lots of emotional energy, I think it's important to stop and go, have I done some things previous to that to help improve my emotional energy so that I've got an abundance of it to deal with this situation? I'm going to give you a weird example. My wonderful wife, Lisa, and I, we don't watch a lot of TV, but we typically find some series or something we'd like to watch. And so we'd picked out one that was on one of the BBC channels or something. And we were watching that and we started getting into it and watching this series. And I noticed that when I would get up the next morning, I was starting to feel a little bit less awake and alive. And I thought, well, I got my rest last night, and what's going on? And this is going to sound really weird, but I just want you to understand how it can affect all of us. Is that I realized that this series we were watching was always just kind of bad. It was kind of dark. It was kind of depressing. It seemed like the main character had one problem after another, and there was never any of the of moments where things were going well for them. And I realized that I was beginning to kind of go, it's not that exciting. Uh, it was affecting me. We don't stop and think about how things going on around us can affect not only our physical energy and our mental energy, but also our emotional energy. And so I encourage you to think in terms of those areas as well as you think about your energy. Now, the last thing about energy, uh, let's take work for a moment. Somebody type into the chat, what's something um, for you that is energizing in your day? What's an activity in your day that's energizing? You look forward to doing. Go ahead and give me a thought there. What's something in your day that's energizing? Coffee break. Thanks, Michelle. Keeping it real. So yeah, so a coffee break is somebody else. Type something else in the chat. What's something else that's energizing in your day? An activity that's a part of your job. I should have said that, Michelle. But an activity that's a part of your job that you look forward to doing. Somebody give me one in the chat. Um, walk at noon. Okay, Kathleen. I hope that's a part of your job, but I'm still sensing that's a break to help you to be more effective in your job. Somebody tell me something that's a project with no distractions. Thank you, Ashley. Whew, I was afraid nobody was in work mode today. Yeah, phone calls to potential prospects. Yeah, those are good examples. Interviews for articles. Yeah, good ones there. And so those are energizing to you. And you finish that and you go, wow, I'm ready to go do something else. On the other hand, think about some of the activities that you engage in during the day that drain you. Yeah, I know it's probably some of those meetings you're having. It may be certain conversation. Yes, thank you, Ashley. The elephant in the room, email, complaints. Yeah, and think about how draining they are. Now, if you were to map those out for a day, okay, I wonder if it would be like plus 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 minus 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 plus plus plus, or would it be like plus minus, or would it be minus 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 plus? Think about that for a moment. If you're constantly engaged in activities that are draining you, is it any wonder that you can't be as effective at that next task that's in front of you because you've drained yourself so much? And so I encourage you, if nothing else, as you remember about this whole energy thing, is to think about when you finish a task, go, huh, was that energizing or was that draining? And as you plan your day, start thinking about how you could, intersperse ones that are draining with ones that are energizing so that you could be at your best for whatever that next task is. So that's the idea around managing energy. Now that's the first of five. So we got four more to go instead of time, because we've talked about we can't manage our time in that way. Second one, schedule. See the example there, we're always busy and schedules. Here's what I find interesting. A great quote that I think it was an article yesterday, and I posted this on my LinkedIn profile. Love this quote by Jane Fraser. She says, when our work regularly spills over into nights, very early mornings, and weekends, it can prevent us from recharging fully, and that isn't good for you nor ultimately for Citi. And of course, she's the CEO of Citigroup. Couple of things that she is asking, or it sounds like she's requiring, she's CEO, but she's requiring that there be no Zoom meetings or video meetings on Friday. And they're actually going to declare an email holiday or something. I forget. I think it's in May, if I'm not mistaken, for everybody across the organization. They're just one day they're going to say, you know what? We all need a break. And I love that because she's exactly right in that our schedules have become such a blur, uh, even before the pandemic, but especially during the pandemic. And so if we're not careful, that schedule isn't being managed in a way that gives us what we need to be at our best. Now, what does the schedule look like that does have some of the things to help you be at your best? Well, this is a slide that I use in one of my training sessions, and these are examples of time blocks that I think you have to have in your day. I think, you got to have a personal one in there. You got to have one where you are investing in yourself. You need a strategic one. When do you think beyond what's right in front of you? When do you think beyond just the urgent? A third one is administrative one. And you see that's, next to email. Sometimes I think, some of you may have a volume of email that you need to actually set aside dedicated time. For some of you, it might just be, okay, in my administrative block, I'm going to work on email along with other things. And then relationships, you need an intentional time to engage with others during your day. And then finally, I think it's really important that you set aside some time for some deep work. Somebody said a project with no distractions when you would be doing that. This is what I think a healthy schedule, if you will, should look like. Now, as you look at the list, I wonder for you, which one is not showing up in your schedule that you ought to manage better so that you could put it in? Which one of these is not a part of your schedule, but you'd like to add it? Give me some thoughts in the chat. Which one of these is not part of your schedule? Thank you. Michelle says relational on that one. Anybody else see one that they go, yeah, I ought to be putting that one in my day? Kathleen says personal. Yep. Yep. There you go. Thank you, Kelly, about you needing that relational. Yeah, we got to be intentional about these things, putting them in our schedule. Okay, thanks. Joan says I really miss relational when we were in lockdown. Yep. Yep. Candy says assessment of progress. Yes, you're right, Candy. We're just checking boxes, and we don't stop and go, is this the best box to check? Is this the way we should be doing it? And so Ashley says, I need to start walking some. Yeah, maybe that's the personal one for you. And the other thing is you can combine some of these. I have some clients, some coaching clients who actually do their strategic block when they're walking. So it's actually a strategic and a personal because they find that as they're moving, then it helps them to think a little bit differently. So again, this is something that even if 90% of our time can't be managed, we can manage our schedule a little differently or a little more effectively. Let's move on to the third one for today. Third one day is focus. And focus is one that we can manage, because if we can manage our ability to focus more effectively, then we're much more efficient at getting the right task done. Now, I want to do something a little bit different with this one. We're going to conduct what I call a focus audit, and I do this with clients when we're talking about helping them focus. And so, hopefully, your workspace or living space does not look like the one on the screen right now. But here's what I want you to do. Okay, I just want you to kind of get an assessment of what's around you, and so here we go. First question. What do you see around you that distracts you when you're trying to work? What do you see around you that distracts you while you're trying to work? What do you see around you? So just take a moment. You can think about that. If you'd like to type something in the chat, that's fine, but you don't have to. But that's the first thing. What do you see that distracts you when you're trying to work? Second thing, thank you. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I'm Candy. Yeah, if it's beautiful weather outside, that's, oh, I want to be outside. Thank you, Kate. Other things that need to be done. See, absolutely. See, here's the challenge. We often say that we want to focus, and we try to say, well, I'm not going to pay attention to that. I'm not going to be distracted by that. And I always call that the chocolate chip cookie conundrum, in that, you can set a plate of chocolate chip cookies down in front of me and say, okay, Jones, don't eat those. And I say, oh, I'm not going to eat those. I have willpower. Well, then all my willpower gets worn down because I'm sitting there smelling them and seeing them. What's a better solution? To move the cookies out of the room? No, not eat them and then they're gone, but to move the cookies out so I can't even see them. That's what would be important. And Linda says something here. If people were to see my office, they would say the items on the wall, but those items don't distract me. Exactly, Linda. If you don't find them distracting to you, that's fine. If you do find them distracting, but you're trying to ignore them, then that's when the issue comes in, I think. Okay, the second thing, it's what do you hear? Okay, what do you hear that's distracting to you or could potentially be distracting to you? And it's obvious there what those kinds of things might be. What do you hear that could be distracting to you? Then third, what do you smell? um, Now, this one may seem weird to some of you. I find it very important that the smells, those kind of things, are refreshing for me, because it just gives me a greater presence, a more bright persona, if you will. All of you've been into a hotel, unfortunately, maybe not recently, but you go into a hotel that smells nice, and you just go, "Oh, I look forward to staying here because of the way it smells." You can go to someone's house. Yes, if they've got great coffee in the pot, then that makes you go, yeah. And so, and then maybe there, Linda mentions about heavy aromas. Yeah, there can be sometimes that those are turnoffs, but realize that every one of these things is trying to distract you. Not, it's not, trying, it just does, because we're always looking to be distracted so that we can survive. And so it's important that we acknowledge the ones that are there. Now, a humorous moment, for me, as far as this whole idea of smell, right now in my diffuser, because I keep one here in my home office, my favorite ones are lavender and is that vetiver or vetiver? I don't know. And then tea tree. I mean, if I want to focus, this is what I put into my diffuser, because there's just something about those smells that really sharpen my senses. They sharpen my mind. And so I use that, and please don't take my man card because of it. It just works for me. I mean, if it works for me, I'm fine with doing it. I have no problem with it whatsoever in that sense. So smell is the third one. The fourth one is touching. Think about how comfortable you are where you're working. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about how uncomfortable their office chair was, and I said, well, why don't you get another one? Well, my company won't pay for it, or something like that. And I'm thinking, well, an office chair is only, you can buy some fairly inexpensive ones, because if you're sitting there uncomfortable, think about how you're not being as effective as you should, because you're constantly thinking about that. Talking with another person in a coaching call the other day, and their chair squeaks, and they said, "Yeah, I've got to oil that." It says every time it squeaks, I remember I've got to oil that. Think about that. You're sitting trying to work on something, and then every few minutes, when you shift your weight in your chair, it goes, eh, and then you go, "Oh yeah, I need to oil that chair." You've taken yourself out of the moment. And I don't know about you, but I need every brain cell I can get focused in the right place. Last one is tasting. Now you say, well, Jones, hopefully I don't see food around me unless I'm, eating lunch or in that workspace. What I mean by this is that, how do you feel as far as your own energy and as far as taking care of yourself as far as food goes? Are you one of those people who've forgotten what lunch looks like because you just work right through lunch? And you may say, oh, Jones, I'm fine. But if you're not feeding your body correctly, you know that you're not able to focus as well as you should. And so I think it's important for at least acknowledge this idea of hey, that might be hindering my ability to focus in that way. So that's our focus audit. One other way I find that's helpful to focus, to help you focus, is to do something called daily questions. It comes from a great book by Marshall Goldsmith called Triggers, and it's when you come up with 3 to 5 questions each day on which you look to improve your focus, and you just develop the questions, and then you work them out that day. You see the ones on your list. Did I do my best to finish a task once I started it? And the great part about asking this question of yourself every day is that if you ask it to yourself every day, you'll eventually start changing behaviors so that you can say yes at the end of the day. Did I take 2 minutes to think longer term? If you didn't, go, okay, how can I do that tomorrow? And then you see the other question there about maybe a potential time block. But daily questions are a powerful way to help you focus. In fact, anything you do of 3. For me, one of the things I do after I've planned my day is that on my desk, I have just a small pad that I write down. Okay, here are my top 3 things. Now I've got some other things I want to get done, but I write those 3 down, and that's just a habit that I've gotten into. And at the end of the day, I say, okay, did I do my best to get my top 3 things done today. So daily questions are a great way to help you do more of that. Moving right along to number 4, probably the toughest one of all, the toughest one, because you think about how much energy, mental, emotional, and yes, and even some cases physical, how much energy we give to relationships, especially if they're unhealthy. Especially if they're unhealthy. So, to help you kind of wrap your mind around this one, I want you, and you can send it to me privately if you like, or you can type just a position. You don't have to put the person's name, please. But who's somebody in your world right now that you just kind of go, yeah, Jones, I'm probably having to expend a lot more energy in that relationship than I would like to. Maybe because you don't see eye to eye, maybe because you just aren't getting along. I wonder who that. Thank you. Michelle says the night auditor. Yeah, okay. One of our educators makes many of us nuts. Okay. Yeah, I want you to get this person in mind for just a moment, okay? Because we're going to walk through some exercise. In fact, I'm going to actually walk you through something on maybe how to manage some of that conflict or some of that negative pressure with them in just a moment. So here are a couple thoughts as we move into this idea of managing relationships. I love this quote from Dr. Richard Swenson, who wrote the book Margin, because he talks about having margin in our life, which includes energy to manage things. 3 types of people in your life: fillers, drainers, and the people who just sit there. Isn't that great? The fillers, the drainers, and the people who just sit there. The fillers, the drainers, and the people who just sit there. And right now, your mind is already going out to all the people that you interact with in your life, and you're going, they're a filler. Yep, they're a they're a drainer. Oh, yeah, they just sit there. There's some people in my life that I want to be fillers. I want them to. I mean, let's be honest. I want them to be a positive influence on me. I want to enjoy being around them, and some of these people have been in my life, been in my life for years, and so one of the things I've had to reconcile is that maybe they're just not that kind of person. They're the person that just kind of sits there. I mean, they're a part of my life, but they're just never going to be that. There's some people I'm going to have to work with in my life that, yeah, they're always going to be a drain on me, and I have tried to work through and make it a more positive situation. Just not going to happen. So I just have to, release the idea that everybody in my life is going to be a filler. Another thought about relationships. Great quote. I don't have a source for this one. I think it's pretty much unknown. But people come into our lives for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. Know the difference. There are some people in my life who I have allowed not to take as much energy away from me, because I say, you know what? They're just going to be here for a season, and I can handle anything for a season. There's some people in my life who I say, you know what? They're here for a reason. They're teaching me something. You're going, yeah, they're teaching me patience. Yeah, that's part of it. But what's the reason that they're here? What do they teach? What can they teach me? And then there's some people who are here for a lifetime, and the people who are in my life for a lifetime, yeah, I need to work even more diligently to try to create a healthy relationship with them versus that person who's just there for a season or potentially a single reason. Now, thinking about that, now here I told you we were going to go through an exercise with you today. Here's a process that I speak on when I'm talking about helping grow a stronger team, and that is how to address the situations with other people when it's just draining you. Remember, we're going to try to manage the relationship a little more effectively in this way. And I think it's important. And the reason I asked you to think about someone a moment ago is that you've probably got somebody you're thinking about that you're going, I just don't want to deal with it. I just put my head down and I just deal, I just go on. That's when I remember the words of my pastor, Luke Jackson. And I love this, of one of his many isms, but he says, nothing ever gets better from neglect. And if we want that relationship to get better, we've got to take some steps to make it happen. And so here's the process I encourage you to use. First of all, give a non-threatening description of the situation from your perspective. Example, let's say that you have someone you work with who frequently interrupts you when you're talking, whether it be Zoom or whether it be in person. You'll start talking and this, they might not disagree with you, but they just, just kind of talk over the top of you. And you're like, oh, it drives me crazy. How do you address that? Well, let's walk through that using this model. Number one, give a non-threatening description. I've noticed sometimes that when I'm talking, you interrupt me. Okay. Now notice what I did is different there. I've noticed sometimes. Now I'm softening it. I'm suggesting that they do it. Now what I really want to say is you interrupt me 99 times out of 100 when I'm talking. That's not helpful because that other person will get defensive and go, yeah, but it's not all the time because there's one time out of 100 I don't. And so I think just starting it by saying I've noticed, it just invites them to be a part of the conversation. I've noticed that sometimes you talk over the top of me or interrupt me when I'm trying to explain something. Okay, step one. Step two, this is where you tell how it makes you feel. Okay, and feelings are important because people can't argue with your feelings. I mean, they might say, well, you shouldn't feel like that, but they're your feelings. And you might say to them, when that happens, I feel, unimportant, or I feel, I feel slighted, or I feel like my opinion doesn't matter, or I feel rushed, or whatever the answer is, but you tell them how it makes you feel. And then moving number three, share the consequences. You know, I find that, um, I don't speak up as much because I'm concerned that you're going to interrupt me or stop me before I get done. Okay, so you just share the consequences, and then the fourth one is asking for their help. Now, this is the great part is you say, can you help me with some ways that we can stop this from happening in the future, or we can minimize this from happening in the future? What do you think are some ways? How might we work through this? That's a great phrase. How might we? Because you're not saying I'm right and you're wrong. How might we work together? Because they may come back and say, well, Jones, I've noticed that sometimes when you're sharing your ideas, I, it just doesn't seem like you've done your homework, and it makes me feel uncomfortable to waste time or spend time when I don't think you've got the facts. And so I speak up because I don't want us to spend a lot of time on something that really doesn't matter. And so you see, they could come back at you, rightfully so, with their own 1, 2, and step 3. And then how do we work together through this? But the key is asking for their help, and then don't leave it please don't leave it until you get to number 5, which is, okay, how's this going to look differently going forward? How's this going to look differently going forward? And then come up with a concrete plan of what you're going to do differently next time. So the next time I bring up an idea, um, I understand that until I'm done, you're not going to respond. Yes, that's correct. I'll hear your idea completely out. Fantastic. Thank you. Just get a simple plan for going forward. I think that's the key. But you got to address the situation, because if not, then that's going to continue to weigh on you, reduce your energy, and also affect how you use your time, because you're having to spend so much mental and emotional energy thinking about that. Number five, and as always, when I finish the presentation, we'll be taking questions, and you can still type your questions into the chat at any time as we talk more about these kinds of things. But last one's choices. If you think about it, every one of the 4 we've talked about today, energy, relationships, oh my goodness. See, I'm hitting the 255 crash this afternoon, but energy, relationships, schedule, and focus, all 4 of them can be managed by the choices that we make. And so I think really when we're talking about time management, what we really mean is we want to make better choices with our time. And that's really my focus and the things that I really try to put out, content wise now. And I think a good example of that in the book, Boundaries for Leaders, it says, in the end, as a leader, you're always getting a combination of 2 things: what you create and what you allow. That's choices, right? what you create and what you allow, what you choose to create and what you choose to allow to be a part of your schedule and to be a part of your life. So some ideas on how to make better choices. First of all, respond instead of react. Respond instead of react. I find myself sometimes, and I actually, for a while, to really help me understand this concept, it's kind of like the, was it the Twix thing where they have the left and the right or something? I had two pieces of paper and I would put them on my desk, and I'd put one that said respond and one that said react. And when I was sitting at my desk, I need to make a decision about something, I would glance down and I would see respond or react. And it taught me to say, okay, response looks like this, reaction looks like this. And I found that it helped me just to stop for a second, which leads to the second one, to make sure I was giving a thoughtful response instead of just reacting emotionally or out of a less than positive place in that way. The second one said, of course, giving yourself time to think is important. Giving yourself time to think. We make so many choices throughout the day, and we never stop and say, is this a good choice of my time? What's the job to be done now? That would move me forward, that would be a response instead of a reaction. That's giving yourself time to think. And then finally, if I say yes to this, I am saying no to. In other words, stopping yourself long enough, you say, if I say yes to this, I'm saying no to. If I say yes to jumping into email right now, then I'm saying no to deep work or focus or something else. If I say yes to this commitment, I'm saying no to that 15 minutes that I really needed of walking time, of personal time, or time with my family and time with others. That's what we mean by if I say yes to this, I'm saying no to that. All right. With that, if you will, I am going to stop sharing my screen for